Good evening. I'd like to call to order the City of Sonoma Special Planning Commission meeting for October 30th. And with that, I'll have the call to order, please.
Commissioner Barnett.
Here.
Commissioner Corrado. Here. Commissioner Willander.
Here.
Chair Felder.
Here.
Commissioner Bopar.
Here.
Commissioner McDonald.
Here.
Commissioner Cribb.
Here.
And I'll ask Commissioner Cribb to lead us in the pledge, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Just a couple of housekeeping items before we begin. First of all, if you have cell phones, please put them in silent mode so they don't disturb the meeting. And because this is a special meeting, members of the public shall have the opportunity to address the Planning Commission concerning items on the agenda during the consideration of that item when I open the public comment, but no other items may be discussed at a special meeting. With that, I will move on to item number 3, which is review and acceptance of agenda. Does anybody have anything on that? Seeing none, I assume there's no late correspondence because we don't have any items. There's no public hearing, there's no items for discussion. I think that moves us to issues update, and I would like to welcome our new planning director, David Storer. And with that, please lead us forward.
For 3 minutes, Mr. Chair, Commissioners. Self-imposed regulation. Happy to be here. Sonoma is a great place to be. I first need to make an apology for bringing you to a special meeting that is so special we decided not to put any items on the agenda. Unique in that way, if you will. But I wanted to have the meeting tonight because you have had a regular meeting canceled, a special meeting canceled, 3 strikes, and I think I'm out of here, right? So I thought we would take this opportunity to say hi to you all as commissioners collectively. I've already had the chance to speak individually to some of you, and appreciate that time that you've taken out to come and visit. I know calendars are busy during this time of the year in Sonoma. The thing that I wanted to communicate to you is a little bit about myself, and then talk about calendars and items that may be of interest to you as commissioners. So as far as general introduction, for some of you that I haven't had a chance to meet, I was born and raised in a small country south of Scotland and east of Wales. And as I speak to you, you might conclude, yeah, he's from England, and that is the case. And when I speak fast and in a microphone sometimes, words start to come out strange. So I apologize for that in advance. I consider myself bilingual, actually. So I can communicate with the natives on occasion. But I emigrated to the U.S. in 1976 during the year of the bicentennial, which was an interesting event in my life. And I attended university here in the United States. I graduated in geography and city and regional planning. So I have an undergrad in geography and a master's in city and regional planning. Don't judge me, but I intended to be in this profession. It's what I've done for almost 20 years in the public sector and about 15 years in the private sector. So I'm happy to be here to help out with issues here within the city of Sonoma. That's a little bit about me. I've been married to my sweetheart for 35 years, 36 years, somewhere around there. And if she watches the video, I'll be in trouble for not nailing the exact year. But we all kind of do those kind of things. So tonight, what I wanted to do was just very briefly tell you about some of the items that are coming up that would be of interest to you as a commission. We do have a regularly scheduled meeting of the Planning Commission on the 8th, at which time we'll be discussing 3 applications for use permits from Verizon. The reason that's of interest to you is because 3 days prior to that at the City Council, they'll be discussing an urgency ordinance related to telecommunication facilities within the city. So if you want to kind of get a taste of what you'll be experiencing on the 8th, you might want to watch the City Council meeting on the 5th. The reason I tell you about the 8th is because a week later we're going to have a special meeting of the Planning Commission to consider the Mission Square project relative to the use permit and its whether it has expired or not expired prior to the issuance of building permits being granted to that project. And so that will be before the commission. And from what I understand, going back to the 8th, I believe Chair Felder, you'll be absent from that meeting.
The one on the 8th.
The one on the 8th, yes. So, so we'll have a little change in the geography of the chair and vice chair. And that pretty much concludes my comments for now. So I'm happy to answer any questions that might come up or respond to any comments from the public.
Okay. I think if the commission would bear with me to hold off on questions, I would open it up for public comment and to give these 3 individuals a chance to speak to anything that has been discussed by the planning director. Okay, I'll bring it back to the commission then for questions or comments to the director.
Okay, I'll start. I've got a few things that I do want to talk about, but I just want to verbalize my displeasure at the change in the term limits for our Planning Commission. When I took my oath of office on December 4th, it was for a 4-year term. And in January, it was changed by City Council to a 2-year term. And I understood that. I was told that, it was a chance to have new people rotate in, and that makes perfect sense to me. And it was listed, obviously, by mistake as the term ending in January of 2021. And it's not about me per se. I just don't understand the logic of it, and I think in this change, I got a letter, an email in August saying no. In fact, the term for the at-large is expiring this January, and I was a little upset. The way it was before August was, to me, a very plausible, logical, well-thought-out plan, where this year a possible turnover of 3 commissioners existed. Next year would be the 3 at-large, and then the year after that would be the other 2 commissioners, which would always mean that there would be a quorum of 5 experienced commissioners seated at a given time, and to ease the transition for new commissioners to come in, which would provide stability and continuity. But now what they have done, and I think this is the mistake, now we have a possible turnover of 6. So it will be a possible turnover of 6 this year. It will be a possible turnover of none next year. And the next year after that, it will be a possible turnover of 5. So you will be leaving this commission absent of a continuity and a quorum of experienced commissioners. And the at-large, I would like to see it changed back. They are not connected to an election. We are voted on by the council. Therefore, we do not have to be beholden to a commissioner to appoint us. So it just doesn't make sense. And I just wanted to publicly acknowledge that I am very upset about this. Not for me, but for the commission and obviously.
In response, that there was just a potential for 8 new planning commissioners. They just refreshed the planning commission. All planning commissioners were removed.
Right.
And 5 planning commissioners had planning commission experience. And so while you're right that there is a potential for 6 new planning commissioners in February, I would think, and I guess we just have to see how it works out, that most of those 6 will be planning commissioners with previous experience. So I just can't imagine a situation where there's 6 brand new planning commissioners, just as there were 8 openings and 5 planning commissioners with experience. And so you're correct. There could be 6. I just don't see that happening. And I think the city council's goal was to align the planning commission with, you're right, the at-large seats are voted on by the entire council, but the entire council, there's a chance that there's a new composition of the entire council every 2 years. And so maybe the city council will change it back, maybe they won't. I guess this is still a work in progress, but I would hope that the future city council in February or January, whenever they're making their decisions, would really consider experience, and those people that have that experience on the planning commission when they are considering their individual appointments and their at-large appointments. And the one thing I would add is, despite the fact that 5 of us have been individually appointed by a city council member, I don't think any of us are beholden to that city council member. And I don't think that's really the right word to use, respectfully.
I'll stand corrected.
I just like to make a comment. So I'm also an at-large commissioner. I believe I've had to reapply for my this is my 3rd year as a commissioner, 3 times. So, and I'm like you, in January, a new person could potentially take over my position, but my understanding is I can apply and put my name on the list and maybe be called up and interviewed and reappointed. I have one concern about this potential of having 6 new commissioners and having 9 and having the turnover, and that has to do specifically with our role in the next 2 years in redeveloping our community plan and our general plan update and our housing plan update and the issues that we face with the urban growth limit line and those policies, which are going to be very important, that guides us in the next 20 years. And I believe it's going to be very important to have some consistency in the next 2 years. And so I hope that the council in 2019 recognizes that, and they create a system to allow for a group of people to move forward in developing those long-range plans. Because I know there's current planning, which is keeping us extremely busy, but more equally important is the long-range planning and our community plan. So I just have faith that we will have a semblance of order to allow us to complete that. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Anyone else want to chime in? I think we've actually moved on to comments from the commission, but
Mr. Chair, if I can,
yeah, you may.
second mistake for the evening. I haven't talked about training, and
Yes.
I sent out an email to you all, I think last week sometime. If you'd like to give me some feedback collectively or individually, have that discussion. Just as a recap, we have a training at the 35th Annual Sonoma State Training on a Saturday. I think it's the first weekend of December. You've been to that in the past. We have that option available to you for training. Usually it's more focused, localized. I think there's a report on the fires and a report on the disaster from last year and some other items for training. The second thing is the League of California has a Planning Commissioners Academy in March in Long Beach. That's also a very valuable thing with respect to meeting fellow commissioners from other jurisdictions and receiving training, whether it's on parliamentary procedure or some other things related to land use and the like. And then lastly, there's the National Conference of the American Planning Association, and usually in April. The good news is it's here in San Francisco, as opposed to being on the other coast or somewhere in between. So there's an economy of scale there for training. That's where you get to be a professional planner. And also they have sessions for commissioners as well and council members. So if that's of interest to you, the bang for the buck. You don't have to go all 3 days. You can take a day. That's something that's within our budget. So if there's an interest in any of those 3 things, please let me know. There is capacity for the Sonoma State. They have 100 slots open as of about a week ago? When we checked into that. So timing is of the essence on that one if that still interests you. Thank you. That concludes my comments.
Thank you. May I just interject? So It has been our tradition, as long as I've been seated on the Planning Commission, to attend that conferences if at all possible, because it's extremely easy to get to. It's local. It's a one-day thing, actually half a day. And so I would encourage all of the commissioners to give that serious thought. And please, if you decide that you want to go, to inform the planning department as soon as you can, so you can get the names on the list. And we had one occasion where they filled up and we weren't able to go. I think they've now changed the venue to a larger room, so I don't think that's a problem anymore. But I think it's still important that if we want to go to that, to please let the planning department know.
Is now soon enough? Count me in.
Yeah, thank you. I was going to give you a drop dead date such that if I didn't hear from you, you won't go.
And I'm into.
How about if we go to November the 16th, which is a Friday? And that gives you a couple of weeks to get.
Yeah, and we have a meeting on the 15th, so we can revisit it at that point.
Yeah, I don't know if they have a deadline for registration.
They probably do, but
With 100 slots open, I think we're pretty safe. Sorry, I think we're pretty safe with 100 slots open.
then I think it's also a very good idea for us to consider additional training and attending some of these other events that come up, as long as the city is able to send us to, at least some of us, to those conferences. I think it's a good idea, so I'd encourage all of you as well to give that thought. Anyone else?
I came prepared.
That's good.
So I'm moving on to another topic. And 6 months ago, I did put a motion forth, and I want to bring it back on the table for us to talk about. And it was parking and traffic issues. So and then I also brought up the development code, but I'm going to save that for later. And but I'd like to talk about parking and traffic. We had an intense year this year on this commission with a lot of heavy-duty projects, all with parking and traffic impacted. And I have asked that we create, I would like to see an ad hoc committee on parking with no more than 4 years, and I would like them tasked to bring on 50 parking spots per year, and at the end of that 4-year term, have a plan in place for another 200 spots to go in line with the parking plan that was submitted to us, which I thought was an excellent plan, which was submitted a little bit untimely. However, so that was one thing I had asked, and we talked about revisiting that for 6 months. I'd like to say something about the traffic. And I had asked for a subcommittee on that as well. However, I would like to see it more of a task force. And I want to say that I am not impressed with any of the traffic reports that have come before us. I think there are flaws in them. And I'm going to be arrogant enough to say to you all, I think I have done a traffic report on my own, but it wasn't really guided properly. I set up regattas, I set up teams of people, I set courses, and I would like to take a team of volunteers in this town and spend a whole week to 10 days being trained on how to collect data and having us as a community step forward and collect data over a 10-day period of time during the most horrendous peak season there is, and then have that data submitted to a traffic consultant for analysis. And I would like to see that also discussed. I put these ideas, I know I'm an out-of-the-box person, and I put these ideas out there hoping to trigger discussion and that we come up with, hopefully, a good plan. I submitted to the city council a one-way traffic scenario that goes around the plaza. Again, I'm not saying that that should be adopted, but it's a starting point to talk about. I live on that plaza. I travel it 2 to 3 times a day sometimes, and I know that we have a parking and a traffic issue, and the reports that come to us that say that we don't, I just totally disagree with. And I want us to see a proper traffic study completed, and I am willing to take that on. So I'm going to leave it at that. We do have a motion that is supposed to bring this all back in 6 months. It is now 6 months.
Mr. Chair, if I can just address the
Yes.
comment. There's a part of my DNA here that's saying we're talking about things that weren't on the agenda, and it's an appreciated comment, but and that's the other part of my DNA is saying, well, this is a key initiative of the city council. I already know that in my short term here. I know that boat is going to leave here pretty soon. It's actually already started, that process has started. Where it is in the calendaring of the city council, I can't really speak to that, but we have money available for a downtown parking study, and proper analysis will happen. So to the extent that I can address it in that brevity, I will do, but I'm a little bit concerned about talking about
Yeah. No,
topics.
it's a fine line, and I'm trying to allow enough comment from an individual commissioner without discussion. As soon as a second person starts to talk about the same thing, I'm going to have to cut it off.
I was under the impression that, so we're a quasi-judicial body and a quasi-legislative body. That's what Jeff Walter told us, I think, the first day. And when it's a project, when we sort of act as quasi-judicial, obviously we can't really have any sort of thoughts. But if it's legislative, which sounds like parking is, or tasting rooms, for example, you're allowed to have thoughts and comments, and you're allowed to advocate for policies. That's what Jeff Walter said.
And I don't know whether he was speaking with respect to a regular meeting or a special meeting. This is a special meeting, so we're constricted by the topics that are on that agenda.
Yeah.
And so to the extent, as you mentioned at the beginning, if it's related to something that I spoke to on my agenda, fair game, whether it's commissioners or the public. But with respect to bringing up fresh content that's not on the agenda or from my comments.
We're getting close to a slippery slope.
Oh, I didn't mean,
Yeah.
no, I agree with you. I mean, not debate the issue. Just, I thought we were on commissioner comments where you could just bring up things.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yep. And I think that's where we're trying to draw the line. Anyone else?
But I would be happy to speak to any of you as commissioners about topics that are on your mind. I've opened up my calendar to you, and I'd love to be able to hear your comments in more detail, perhaps, than in front of a microphone.
Okay, so I'll go one more, and then I'll shut up, if I can. I also have brought up numerous times that I believe that we need to start delving into the development code. And I would like to see a subcommittee set up that is meeting regularly. We do know that there are discrepancies in this code in definitions, and it's caused some strife. And I think it's time that we roll up our sleeves and tackle it. And even before we even think about the general plan. But I do know that we have to talk about the UGB as well when we talk about the development code. So those are 3 items that I would like to see get on the agenda.
And speaking of the general plan, do you have a forecast of what the city intends to do in terms of getting a consultant involved, or how we're going to proceed on that?
Yes and no. I'll tell you the yes part. I can tell you when I was interviewed for the position that the urban growth boundary in the general plan were all there, even the development code. And so I've had, 3 weeks now to kind of look at those things, even read your housing element, your new circulation element. So those things are on my mind. They're certainly on the city's mind before I came aboard. And I can tell you from a meeting that I attended this past week that the county is in the process of starting at the Board of Supervisors those very same discussions about amending, updating, if you will, the county's general plan. And they're actually starting to talk about maybe revising their housing element in concert with that. I'm not talking about that here. What I am talking about is that is, again, another key initiative of the council with respect to addressing the urban growth boundary. I believe that's come up on one of the council meetings that I watched in preparation for the position, where they talked about the death date, if you will, or the expiration, that's probably the best date, coming up in December 31st of 2020. So yes, very aware of the process and starting one. The no part is don't have a consultant started yet, to start on this yet.
Could I piggyback on what you just said about what the county's doing? The county is starting their long-range planning and looking at their urban growth limit lines, so to speak, where they're going to allow or where they may not allow future development. It could be or may not necessarily be incongruous with what our goals are for our city, and how we are looking at ourselves in a bubble, almost thinking that we're trying to preserve open space and agriculture and the community and character of everything in the unincorporated area, whereas the county is starting a process that may be contradictory to what we think here in Sonoma might happen. They call us the city in the bubble, that we live in a little isolated bubble. The county does its own thing, the city does its own thing. The reason why I bring this up is because I think it's very important that staff and even our commission and the council be aware always of what the county's doing, to make sure that we're working together with them, and that we may not necessarily have the same ideas and visions. We need to understand what those are and how they affect our city. And we may try to intensify development, encourage high-density housing in our city to preserve agriculture and to preserve character in the unincorporated area. And the county may be looking at high-density housing in the unincorporated area, which is incongruous with what our goals are. So we need to understand and have a reality check of really what's happening. And I'm glad that you brought this up, and I know that this is now on the council's radar, and we need to continually be vigilant about understanding what the county's doing and looking at, for example, around our own corporate boundaries, looking at areas that right now aren't developed and focusing on areas that could potentially be high-density housing.
I believe the county staff are going to be talking to the Board of Supervisors in December to start their process. So
Yes.
Stay tuned, and we'll stay tuned too. We'll keep you informed.
Yes, thanks.
Anyone else?
I just want to completely echo what Commissioner McDonald just said. I know that the county, and Gina might be able to say more about this, is in the midst of the spring specific plan, and they've completely rezoned areas of Highway 12 and even I think down to Donald, which comes right up to the city of Sonoma. And from my perspective, there has been very little interaction between the city and the county, and I view Sonoma to be basically one community from Glen Ellen down to Shelville. We're all basically the same town, even though they're two different jurisdictions. And to Bob McDonald's point, I mean, we need to all sort of be aligned on that. And so as we sort of embark on this plan, I think working with and sort of getting on the same page with the county would be extremely important. Another concern of mine, I sort of want to echo, and I don't want to obviously get into the issues that Commissioner Corrado was talking about, but earlier this year, we sort of brought forward to our two planning directors ago, parking, the design review discussion, various sort of initiatives that we wanted to get going. And obviously, for a variety of reasons, and it's no one's fault, those haven't happened yet. And so I just want to communicate to you, just to sort of encourage us not to lose sight of that, because obviously projects tend to be and probably should be the priority, and with a short staff and projects, the sort of kind of policy directions that we're trying to sort of shape as a commission sort of getting forgotten about, and then we encounter problems down the road because we didn't address them ahead of time. So I don't want to forget that. I also want to bring up I believe the city council sort of schedule had tasting rooms coming up on their agenda soon, but from what I understand, we haven't really even finished our discussion. And so what I am concerned about there is we have had 2 meetings on that, and we sort of, from what I understand, wanted to sort of really get some more data or at least talk about that. We haven't even really come up with or recommended or even thought about really an ordinance or if there should be one or not or all that. And what it seems like is there's going to be the moratorium is going to be over in May and things move at a snail's pace, and then the city council is going to freak out, and then they're going to decide something in April, and then they're going to send it back to us and say you have to sign off on this. And that completely ruins this whole healthy process that we were supposed to evaluate and come up and get more economic analysis, and should we have a moratorium or should we not, and what's the number, and maybe we shouldn't have enough. I mean, and so what was a really good idea, I feel like, is going to be rushed at the end, and I would really encourage that not to happen. And I would also encourage the policy, whether it's cannabis or tasting rooms or 5G or whatever it is, to at least be analyzed and thought about and start here, and then we make recommendations to the city council instead of the city council doing everything and then telling us what we have to pass.
Anyone else? Yeah, you may do that.
In the anticipation of next Thursday, I took the opportunity to make contact with Mike Thompson's office and asked him if he could provide us, with some information as far as what the government has really done in terms of these small tower transmission applications. So after about 10 days, I got a response back from one of the assistants, and they are providing us with information from what is referred to as the Congressional Research Service. So I have the email, and it's 2 parts. It gives an overview, and then there are a number of, I think, embedded places that you can pursue further. But I wanted to make sure that everyone got a copy of this in the anticipation of next Thursday.
Are we done?
I had one more question. I was under the impression that there could theoretically be an emergency ordinance drafted to postpone any sort of 5G applications. Maybe I'm misunderstanding. And is that what the meeting is going to be discussing on November the 5th?
So the city council will be discussing an urgency ordinance.
An
on the
urgency
5th.
ordinance, okay.
And that will be at a public hearing that I was talking about earlier that you might want to watch. In anticipation for the November 8th meeting, I will tell you that the urgency ordinance will not be applicable to the 3 permits that will be coming before you as a body. So there are some fine-tuning pieces there, but if you can at least just watch the city council meeting and watch that discussion, and then we'll help explain that through the process as we meet on the 8th.
I would think that packet for the council should come out on Thursday or Friday at the latest, so if you stay watching the website for that, you can be able to get that information
Okay.
for whatever is going to be presented on Monday.
And when is our packet going out for the November 8th meeting?
Believing that, well, it's being written as we speak, I'll tell you
Okay.
that much, but quite literally, I would think. But I want to say Friday.
Friday.
Friday, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Because of the nature of things that are going on, we've got the 5th and then the 3rd, they're pretty much the same day. So, I believe it's Friday.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Seeing none? Oh,
I forgot. So I didn't bring this up at the beginning, but we have had in the last year 8 special meetings. And as discussed at the beginning of the meeting, we can't have public comment at items not on the agenda at the beginning of the meeting. Or it's not agendized that way, because state law requires that at a regular meeting, but not at a special meeting. And so, since we have been doing so much business by special meeting, and the city council has as well, quite frankly, while state law doesn't require public comment at the beginning of the meeting, it certainly doesn't say you can't have it. And so, I would like to make the request that in the future, if we have future special meetings, and oftentimes there will be no one to offer public comment, but it doesn't seem to make any sense to me, because we do so much business by special meeting that in some months we don't even have regular meetings, we have special meetings. We should offer the public the opportunity to speak about whatever they want at the beginning of the meeting. And so I know there was some research on this, and I don't know what the next steps are, if that's the pleasure of the commission or the chair, but what precludes us from allowing the public to speak at the meeting? It just has to be on the agenda first?
I think, David, you've had some discussion with legal counsel, have you not, on this issue?
Yeah, and it has been the practice of the city council to have special meetings, and also that of the commission. But with respect, you're correct, Commissioner Commissioner Barnett, that the practice has been not to allow, because the special meetings are that they're created for a particular reason, whether it's a project or a policy document that's unique to that meeting. That's the basis for that meeting, and so the public is not afforded that opportunity, and that's the practice of the city. That would need to change from the council.
Is it possible to solicit the council to see if that direction could be changed, at least for this commission? We don't necessarily have to have the council adhere to that same thing, but since we generally are only meeting once a month or possibly twice, and it seems that it would be prudent to let the public have an early opportunity to make their thoughts, will, desire known to us, even though it can't be discussed at that meeting. And so I guess I would encourage you to go back to the council and just to find out if there's any way that the Planning Commission at least could be given an exception to that standard that the council has taken on for themselves.
And to follow up, when there's a special meeting about one project, as you say, I mean, I sort of understand that, but I bring it up because our practice, at least in the last 12 months, it seems like we've had a lot of special meetings just to accommodate more projects. And so it really is a special meeting that functions as an extra regular meeting. And if we're going to be continuing to do business that way, I think we should have public comment. Now, if we're going to, have a special meeting on one major project, I understand why maybe it's not necessary. Yeah. I just bring it up because I've seen it at the city council level, and I've seen it at this level, that in my view, the special meeting provision is being used a lot because we have so much stuff on the books, and it doesn't, just why not have public comment at the beginning? Sometimes people don't even speak. It's just,
We're trying to make sure that you have plenty of things to do.
Note to self, no special meetings in the future.
Or just let the public speak, either one.
Well, on that note, I thought I was going to be quiet, but what about us going to a 2-meeting-a-month agenda?
Well, I can address that. You have an ordinance that says you meet once a month, so it would require an ordinance change. So that's another option, I suppose.
Is it meet once a month, or is it at least once a month?
It's once a month. They're set,
okay,
just like the council's dates are set. Yeah.
Can I ask another question? I had written this down. I totally forgot to ask you, and this also kind of segues into having more than one meeting a month. What is the progress and status of hiring additional staff to help you? I know that there's a senior planner position, and you were looking at possibly adding planning staff members and also contract planners. So to fill your arsenal with?
Yeah, thanks for that question. So again, I've been here 3 weeks and trying to evaluate our resources, the project load, special meetings, throw that up in the air with the council's key initiatives, trying to balance those balls as you will. What's clear is we have had the discretion to hire outside planning contract help, and so we're currently doing that. I need some time to evaluate, to see the workload, see what I can kind of work out for myself as not necessarily being the project manager, but trying to organize the resources that we have. So yeah, we currently have a vacancy in the senior planner position. Maybe that gets filled in that title. I believe the recruitment started concurrently with one for my position. So I think the idea is that I'll evaluate the situation and come up with a recommendation to fill it either as is, with that particular position, underfill it, create more positions, play with the budget a little bit, trying to figure out how to do that. Because at the same time, we let contract staff finish when they're done with a particular project. Is it healthy to have, the right mixture? I think so. I think it's a good idea. But I'm still in that reviewing process.
Okay, thanks.
Following up on that idea in terms of contract staff, is it your perspective, is that really in the best interest of the community? Because I'm almost seeing it as an independent comes in, has a limited focus, a project comes to them, they may or may not have the greater perspective of the community. So I'm not a real fan of it, to be honest, and I was just curious what your experiences have been.
Yeah, my experience, I've worked in about 8 public agencies, cities, counties, large, small, that kind of thing. My preference is to have staff. When I started work in the city of Elk Grove, we had 3 staff members and 75 contractors, but that was because they had just incorporated and kind of subsumed the county staff to do that kind of role. But that particular city, and most cities, will then certainly wean themselves away from the contractors and start to employ city staff. There's obviously, an economy of scale, if you will. It's probably not the right analogy, but so my preference is to have city staff and then use contract staff as adjunct staff when the volume kind of gets upside down.
Yes, I'm going to make another comment. One of the things that we were talking about with David, the previous director, was looking at potentially having some sort of like a enterprise fund or some sort of a billing system where you would be able to justify adding staff members by creating a more equitable way of charging for staff time. And I think that was something that the ball was rolling on down the road with that. I don't know where that is, but that, Commissioner Wellender's point is that if there is a revenue stream and applications and fees that and projects that you can bill against and you can justify adding permanent staff members. And so I was hopeful after talking to David that that was the way you guys would be going, and so.
I'll give you his address in Grass Valley, and you can go pursue that.
Yeah, but it seemed hopeful that was the way it was going to go.
The point is, that'll be something I can talk with the city manager when it comes budget time. Again, making sure we've got the right resources. I'll have plenty of time to make that analysis. May have even made some recommendations prior to that point in time, but full cost recovery, yeah, we need to kind of do a better job of collecting for the costs that we expend on projects. And
right, and the council is really would be the impetus, because they would be creating a new fee schedule and approving it and creating a different billing mechanism for the planning department.
The interim planning director for you, and after D1, worked on that, the cost recovery, and it came out that a typical city recovers about 50 to 70% of staff costs, and Sonoma recovers 12. So Sonoma's cost recovery is 12%, whereas a typical city is 50 to 70%. And so there's a significant gap there that, it's pretty obvious.
something I'll be looking into.
I think we're going to wind it up. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move that we adjourn.
Is there a second?
I second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.